people will go with their fancy cars and shoot something in the townships and then go back to their actual lives, right? But what are you actually doing to pour into those communities? Because the township is not an aesthetic, it's people's lives, right? So I think people do this thing where they tend to go to townships, give motivational talks and stuff like that, which is great. Yeah, kumbaya. But what are you actually doing, right? It's one thing to say, I'm going to do this is how I can empower you. But are you actually empowering them?
Dumelang, welcome back to the Alpha Female Podcast. My name is Lerato, and today I'm joined by Tiisetso, her and I will be speaking about everything 16 June 1976. If you're new here, please click on the subscribe button. And if you're a regular with us, please just stay tuned. Tiisetso, how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm excited to actually speak to you. How was the drive here?
It wasn't bad. A bit far, but...
Yeah, it was far. It was really far even for me too, but I'm just happy to be here and have this conversation with you. We'll start things off light. I'm just going to ask you a few questions to try and get to know you.
Okay.
Can I start?
We can go for it.
Okay. If you could go back in time, what one thing would you tell your teenage self?
Ooh, teenage self.
Yeah, like 15-year-old Tiisetso. What would you say to her?
I don't think I'd tell her anything.
Really?
No.
I have a lot to tell that girl.
Cool. I think I was where I needed to be at the time, and I'm okay with that.
That's pretty cool. I think I'd tell Lerato, who's 15, that I'm so proud of her. Like, she's doing well.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. If you could have any celebrity be your best friend, who would you pick?
The thing is, I'm not into celebrities. I don't know celebrities.
Why?
They don't know me either. Let's see. Local or international?
Let's keep it local.
Probably KO. I used to have like a crush on KO when I was young.
So. Like Kara KO.
Yes.
Okay.
He's cool. He's snazzy. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's kind of cool. I feel like with me, I'd choose Thandiswa. Like, she's been cool all her life.
That's why.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the thing that you like that creeps other people out?
I love being in the dark. So if you call me, chances are I'm sitting in the dark. I don't like my lights being on. In the mornings when I get prepared, I'll have like my bathroom light on because it's like not too bright compared to the bedroom one. So I'll technically get ready in the dark.
Yeah, I wouldn't stay with you.
Why?
I've
seen enough. I'm not desperate to see anything.
Okay, thank you. Well, that was it. I just wanted you to laugh a little before we
worked.
get into the conversation. Tiisetso, please just tell us more about yourself, the work you've done, where you've traveled, all of that.
So my name is Tiisetso. I am from a small town in the Vaal called Tiisetso. It's kind of sort of an Afrikaans town. So I went to an Afrikaans high school for the last 3 years of high school. What is called Dr. Milan. Learns everything in Afrikaans.
That's so
which
wild.
Is so contradictory because that's what the youth of 1976.
And you literally went and you're like, this is the Afrikaans I want to learn.
I think it's a geographical issue and not necessarily by choice, but also it was by choice. I am the middle child, so I'm sandwiched between two boys.
You're like the princess.
Yeah, period. The Beyonce of the family.
Yes.
I went to varsity at UJ, did all 3 degrees at UJ, started off with a BA degree because I was like, I want to change the world. One of my electives introduced me to tech. So I had a genuine interest in tech, and I was just like, you don't need to specifically be in a certain environment to make a change. So you can do other things and still make a difference. So I did my honors and my master's in information management, and my master's was centered around making sure that tech is accessible to underserved communities, because oftentimes we introduce all these new buzzwords and all these new, technologies, but it often means that people in underserved communities get displaced. So how do we ensure that that doesn't happen? And then professionally, I am a management consultant, currently work for the Big Four as an enterprise transformation consultant. All that means is that companies come to us. This is the issue that we're facing. How do we solve that? There are different niches to it. So I would work across processes and technologies and streamlining that for businesses.
Oh, that's such a cool job. I'm kind of jealous, but okay, let's then get into the conversation about
Yes.
16 June 1976 and just reflect on that. When you think about it, what emotions does it sort of give you? Is it more of like grief or pride? What exactly do you feel?
I'd say a bit of both,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think grief because of the lives that were lost. We see it in the settings today, right? There are certain things that don't need to happen in order for you to have access to your basic rights.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think they should have lost their lives just so they could be taught in English. I think also pride as well. Like I said, I went to an Afrikaans school and I only went towards the back end of high school. It's not easy. But also seeing that they managed to do what they did with as little as possible. So it also begs the question that in today's setting, what can we do? Because we have much more than they have available to our disposal.
Okay. I like how you like spoke on the grief because it's mostly what I've been feeling. This year on the 16th of June, I was just thinking about it that kids died, like 12-year-olds died.
It's
It wasn't
crazy.
like growing up people who were being shot at. It was 13-year-olds, 17-year-olds
Yeah.
fighting to have access to like better education.
Yeah.
Um, it was just insane to me.
And you know that picture where there's a guy carrying Hector Peterson? I don't
Mm-hmm.
know till like this year's June 16 that that guy's body was never found.
There's a lot of so I'm from Soweto and you hear a lot of grandmothers telling these stories.
Yeah.
And someone just told me that they don't know what happened to their brother. People's friends died, they don't know where they're
And
buried.
you have to live with that
And
every
you have
day.
to there's still grief that we are so not talking about.
Yeah,
And I feel like we need to have more of these conversations where we unpack the grief Black people are still carrying from
definitely. I agree.
from whatever happened. Um, let's get into today's youth then. What energy do you feel like we are carrying
Um,
compared to the youth of 1976?
yeah, I think probably we're still like fighting for freedom, but it just manifests differently, right? Um, in 1976, it was marches, it was placards, it was bodies being burned. And now maybe it looks a bit different. Maybe it's wanting to be in rooms where, you know, we previously wouldn't be in, right? It's advocating for changes, it's drafting policies, it's um, fighting for other people's rights. So I think the energy is still the same. It's just packaged differently compared to 1976.
Okay. So what you're basically saying is we are still struggling, but in different ways now.
Yeah.
Okay, I love that. I love your thoughts. And let's get then into you as a person. Do you feel like you're continuing a legacy or you're trying out something new, something that's more of like born free?
Yeah, legacy is a big one. And
Mm,
I think for me, there's no pressure to like start a legacy of my own. Um, I stand on the shoulders of great giants, you know. Those people existed so that I could be where I am today. So I think maybe not starting a legacy of my own, but it's an extension of those that came before me and the rights they fought for.
Okay, that's a good one. Um, I also want to ask you something. Um, you are in many different spaces, diplomatic spaces,
Yeah,
academic spaces, professional spaces. In those spaces that weren't initially built for Black women like you
yeah.
and I, how do you then still try to carry your Blackness and feminist values in those rooms?
I I okay, I wouldn't consider myself a feminist and
Really?
not to distance myself from the cause,
Okay.
but I think out of respect of the people that are feminist, I think it's more nuanced than standing up for rights. But just to answer your question, like even when it's not labeled, right? For
Mm,
me, being a feminist means um, being the voice of the voiceless. It means equity. It means, the basic right to be human, to just exist in those spaces, right? So, being in the boardroom and fighting bias, for example,
mm,
that's me advocates. That's me like extending my hand to the next person, fighting that they don't face the same things that I faced. It's being in rooms where I talk about issues that don't just affect me, but everyone else. And even if I'm not too familiar with the experience, but being human enough to acclimatize myself and learn about what that experience is and speak about that. It's also creating platforms where I speak on what's happening across the world. And, sometimes it's just making the next person aware of what's going on and how you can lend a hand.
okay. Can I ask you just a side question?
Yeah.
Why are you not a feminist? Why do you not identify as a feminist?
Like I said, I think it's a lot more nuanced than that. And I think this comes from like being on Twitter.
Okay.
um, Everything is just deep there. I think for me, when I was on that platform, I'm not on there anymore, but when
Mm-hmm.
I was there, you could speak about something, but because you don't have the right terminology
Mm-hmm.
or the right English to express it, then it's like it's a bit performative and stuff like that. So um, the cause is not forgotten. I think for me, I stand for what I stand for, and I'll stand for it boldly. I don't think it just needs to. I don't think everything always needs to be attached to like a title. So I don't think I fully understand what feminism is. And hence, I wouldn't attach myself to that. And maybe it's because I allowed Twitter to get to my head.
I
Um,
think you did.
and you know what? That's okay. That's okay. But I think the values are still there, and
Okay.
I'm okay with that. I'm not married to the title. It's okay. They can have it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll have that conversation another time. Another
Okay.
time. I'm still on the theme of like finding your voice and all of that
Mm.
as like the youth of today. When you see other Black young girls like you, what do you feel like you have to share with them?
I think opportunities. I think it's lending a hand and letting them know what's available to their disposal. It's making them understand the importance of education, the importance of being fully you, and um, I think drawing inspiration from others, but also leaving room to understand who you are and what exactly you want to pursue,
Mm,
right? It's helping them move into a certain direction. So I think a lot of us, when we're in high school, we're fully aware of what ANSFIS is. And, you apply to that, but there are much more opportunities available. There's fellowships available.
mm.
So I think just broadening their knowledge and allowing them to dream whilst holding their hand.
I had this conversation with a colleague, and she was just making me realize of the ways that I've been privileged.
Yeah,
Um, because I thought going to Black schools, I'm very underprivileged, of which I am. But there's like young kids in like the Eastern Cape, in Limpopo somewhere. What you're saying now that we're all aware of like the resources we
yeah,
have, they have absolutely no idea.
yeah,
They're my young cousins at home, back in Mpumalanga. And I realized how things that were so obvious for me when I was a teenager are not so obvious to
For the
them.
next person, yeah.
Which leads to my then next question on youth empowerment, right? So there's all this talk about youth empowerment, but the reality is that so many of our Black brothers and Black sisters at home are not empowered at
Yeah.
all. So this empowerment that's being talked about, where exactly is it happening? What do you think is the actual issue?
So I was watching something on TikTok. I think where most of us are, doom scrollers on TikTok.
That's my girl.
And they were speaking about, this creator was talking about how people will go with their fancy cars and shoot something in the townships and then go back to their actual lives, right? But what are you actually doing to pour into those communities? Because the township is not an aesthetic, it's people's lives, right? So I think people do this thing where they tend to go to townships, give motivational talks and stuff like that, which is great. Yeah, kumbaya. But what are you actually doing, right? It's one thing to say, I'm going to do this is how I can empower you. But are you actually empowering them? So I think the talks are tired. Let's do less of the talking and actually contribute to these people. And it doesn't always have to be monetary. Sometimes it's passing an opportunity to the next person and say, listen, I think you do great in this. How do we make it happen, right? It's making people aware that there are scholarships for what do you call this, an international primary school or something like that. I think you'd be great because your grades are good. How do we do this? It's saying maybe you should go to what is it called? Extra classes and grow the skill. It's maybe learning how to crochet or start a business, right? So doing less of the talking and actually contributing to people's lives.
I find it so scary that it's been so many years after 1994, but young people like you and I are still having these conversations. The other time I was just thinking about what happened to young people that were maybe matriculating in like 1998, 2000. What happened to all those people? Because till today, you still find that a 21-year-old that was born in, when were 21-year-olds born?
2004.
2004. My sister's 2004. I'm so embarrassed.
You should be.
But you still find that someone that was born in 2004 is still the first to go to university. What happened to all those generations? And it's so scary because we are being denied opportunities by other Black people.
For me, I think it happens. I think the expectation is because there's such a few of us in a space, we're all going to help each other, which is not the case. And I learned this in high school. So to give you context, in high school, there were very few, because it was an African school, there were very few Black people, right? And they actually bullied each other. And
really?
Yeah. I think at first it was a bit of a shock because...
Why are you doing that to each other?
Yeah. And then after all, I think there's also this scarcity mindset that there's only room for just me at the table. So it's maybe we need to shift that mindset to we can all succeed. How do I bring my brothers along? So I think even in corporate, this happens a lot where a Black person will be in a room where we wouldn't typically exist. And instead of creating opportunities for them, it's like, okay, how do I make the next person work for this opportunity? Because it didn't come easy for me. Which I guess I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah. Okay, and now I want to like fully get into like your academic life. You being at UJ and all of that. When you were at UJ, it was probably not as easy.
Yeah.
What do you think are some of the struggles Black students still face in like the education systems, quite similar to what Black students were facing in 1976?
I mean, I wouldn't know what 1976 went through, but I think as much as we have like funding opportunities and, the privilege to actually go to school. Institutions and even these scholarships need to understand the context of who they are funding to go to school. Some people in varsity are not just there to learn; they're also faced with the burden to survive. It's also when my anus first kicks in, I need to send money at home, right? Which makes the learning environment a bit difficult for them. I think it's also privilege exists in those spaces, right? So whether it's because you have more money or because of your skin color, it's a real thing. So I think context is really important in those environments. It's not just about getting the degree. Because of where I come from, how I get that degree could be slightly different. It could force me to drop out. Yes, I have a buzzer. And sometimes because we're not used to those environments, like I don't have the context of that person's situation. It was like, yeah, but this person had a bursary that had good marks, so why would they drop out? You don't know people's circumstances. So I think context is really, really important in those environments.
Yeah, I get that. I feel like when I sit and just think of my own journey in varsity, I was just like my blackness was just on my face. That you need to remember that this place was not built for people like you.
Yeah.
They didn't want girls from Soweto there.
Which varsity did you go
I
to?
also went to UJ, but I
Okay.
was just reflecting that this was not spaces that were initially built for
Yeah.
you. So whatever happens to you, the white friend you made in varsity is not having the same experience that
Nope.
you experiencing because they have more resources,
Yeah.
they have more support. They're not the first to graduate from
Exactly.
home.
Yeah, there was actually a conversation about it, how like white people aren't like, yeah, they'll graduate, but for them, there's no pressure to walk that stage, right? And it comes from they're not breaking any generational curses. Whereas
Yeah.
for me, if I'm the first to get a degree at home, it's a big thing. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. Like celebrate it,
Yeah, like getting a master's degree
Yeah,
is
it's not a joke. I think for me, I was very humble. First degree, second degree. Third degree, I was like, listen, you can't tell me anything because it took so much for me to get what I have. And I also don't take for granted the fact that I did that without accumulating any debt, right? Not everyone is able to
not
say,
everyone is
you know.
privileged.
So for me, I don't take that for granted. And sometimes it's not you bragging. I'll tell my story. You don't know who's inspired. You don't know who's listening and who is going to like walk that path just because I was able to like tell my story. So yeah, it is what it is.
And I feel like it's also a thing of like with them, they know that from a very young age you're going to be a pilot and it will happen.
Yeah.
But with our brothers and sisters back at home, it's not the case. You
It's a
find
fight.
that from a class of maybe 40 matriculants, only 10 make it to varsity, but only 4 will graduate because of the struggles that
Yeah.
we find ourselves in varsity, not having food, not affording textbooks. You can't even call it home because when you call it home, they also do not have.
Exactly.
So yeah,
Sometimes they're just like, hey, I don't have anything. Maybe just come back home and there's nothing you can do.
yes, it's this other lady described it as like the daughters of apartheid. If I could put it as that, we are the racism is structural in the fact that even 30 years after whatever happened, we will still feel it.
Yeah, and I think it will probably take a while. Yes, we've made progress, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
Okay, what does protest look like to you today?
Um, I think it's shifted. I think now it's more creating platforms where you can. I think it's okay for it to be digital these days, right? Um, I could I could come up with an initiative that advocates for something near and dear to my heart, and that's protest. I could, start a business. I could use my platform to advocate for what other people are going through or raise funds for a special cause. That's protest. It doesn't always need to be loud. I think today it doesn't always require us to be in the streets and, torch stuff or march. But to an extent, I think the marching is important. All right. But I think there are environments where, like, if I work for a particular company, for example, I need to be very careful about what I associate myself with because it's a political risk to the company. But it's also how do I create alternatives for protesting? Hence, I say it's not always, I don't always need to be out in the street burning something. I can still use my platform to, as a voice, to advocate for something.
I think for me, protest is sort of like now classed like this protest you'll have is like the black lower class,
Yeah.
and then there's protests now where it's now the black middle class. Where it's now digital. But for
Yeah.
the black lower class, protest is more like they're still fighting for access to
Yeah.
education. They're still fighting because they're hungry. They're still fighting because they don't have electricity. They don't have basic access to basic
Yeah.
needs. But protests might then look different for
Yeah.
the black middle class where we're now fighting for, oh, I need to get paid better.
Yeah.
I need to get a promotion. Why am I not being promoted?
True.
The protest is it's
Yeah,
more of
it's
like a
different.
class thing.
Yeah.
It's different. It's different for everyone.
I agree.
How do you stay grounded?
Ooh, through prayer,
Mm-hmm.
through my friends and family. I love everyone. I just
Prayer is so important, eh?
It is, it is. And I think there are certain circumstances you go through that just force you to be a prayer warrior, especially in
Yeah.
your 20s, or like just
That was
force
me
you.
last year. Like something was in the air last year. I was
No,
wow.
same.
Last year was.
Oh, oh, it built character. Last 2024 fully built my character. But yeah, I think prayer, being surrounded by family and friends, I think allowing myself to be aware of stuff as well
Mhm.
and understanding what I can do to help the situation. But I think also, like with media outlets, I recently went on a social media break. I think we're consuming too much information in real time nowadays.
But it's important,
It is, but
guys.
it's also knowing when to take a step back when you need
Okay.
it, right? It's not normal for
When you
us.
need to come back to
Yeah,
yourself.
you
Okay.
know. So also give people grace. Sometimes you might be used to me using my platform to speak on something.
Mm.
And then the one time when there's a march for a specific individual and I don't speak on it, and you feel like, oh, why don't you speak about it? It's not important to you. But people get overwhelmed, or maybe sometimes it's a situation that's too close to home, right? You
Mm.
don't know my history. Just because I haven't shared it on social media doesn't mean it's real. So it's also extending grace to people and allowing them to break away from um, global issues or whatever's happening. It's okay if you don't want to speak on something. Don't feel the pressure to advocate for it. But also, it is important to use your voice in the same time. I think for me, like, it's okay to take breaks, but use your platform to speak on things.
Okay. I fully get that. And I like how you emphasized on the importance of community.
Yeah.
I fully get you on that one. If it wasn't for my friends and family, I would have lost myself. We've reached the end of the podcast. I have a last question for you.
Okay.
If we were going to now play this podcast, let's say the youth of 1976 sits and
Yeah.
they sit and listen to everything you
Yeah.
said, how do you think they'd feel?
I think they'd be proud.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, there are strides that still need to be made, but their fight wasn't for nothing. I think for anyone that's watching, the important message is don't don't fight to be in places that don't want you. That's not what the youth of 1976 were advocating for. Um, let the fight matter. They fought for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
I think as limited as their resources were at the time, draw inspiration from that. Like, what can I do? Yes, I'm in this situation, but it's not the end. If you have the means to fight, fight. It's not always easy, but it's important. Today, we're where we are because of the fight of our ancestors. So and impact is not always immediate, right? So the choices you make today might have an impact on those that come after you. So always keep that at the back of your mind. What legacy do I want to leave behind?
Yeah, I also think that they would be so angry that we're still struggling with a lot of things
True.
they were really struggling on. But thank you so much for
Thank you so
giving
much for
us your
having me.
time and allowing us to have a conversation with you. For our subscribers, please like, comment, and as I said, if you're new here, please click that subscribe button because we will be coming back. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye.